In the courtroom during the inheritance dispute, my daughter Harper leaned toward me and whispered, "You are never going to see another dime of Dad's money." Caleb, my son-in-law, smiled with that arrogance he had perfected over the last 2 years. She was never capable of succeeding in life anyway. Harper adjusted the expensive jewelry on her neck, that pearl necklace that had belonged to my mother and that she simply took from my jewelry box without asking. She looked at Caleb, then at me, and said with a cold smile, "We actually feel sorry for you." The judge opened my envelope at that moment. She began to read. Her eyebrows raised slowly. And then something happened that no one in that room expected. She began to laugh. It wasn't a discreet chuckle. It was a genuine guffaw that echoed against the walls of the courtroom. "This is the best thing I have read in 22 years on the bench," she said, as she continued reading, shaking her head in disbelief. The smile froze on Harper's face. Caleb straightened in his chair, all his arrogance vanishing like smoke. Behind them, Caleb's parents looked at each other with growing confusion. I remained motionless, hands clasped on my lap, feigning the same fragility they had used to justify every one of their humiliations. But inside, something in me was smiling, because I knew exactly what the judge was reading, and I knew that everything was about to crash down on their heads. The judge held up several documents that were inside the envelope. Her expression changed from amusement to professional severity in an instant. "Mrs. Harper, Mr. Caleb," she began with a tone that cut like glass, "can you explain to me why, during the last 18 months, you have been withdrawing amounts exceeding $80,000 from Mrs. Eleanor Vance's accounts, while telling her she barely had money for her basic medications?" The silence that followed was so dense it could be felt physically. Harper opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Caleb looked toward the door, as if calculating his escape options. Caleb's parents sank into their seats, their faces losing all color. The judge continued, her voice increasingly hard. "And this is just the beginning of what her mother documented here. Forged power of attorney documents, property transfers without consent, bills for luxury travel paid with her pension while you kept her on a budget of $50 a week for food." Harper finally found her voice, shaky and high-pitched. "That is not true. My mother is confused. She doesn't understand how finances work. We were just managing her money to protect her." "Protect her?" The judge held up another document. "Protect her by spending $15,000 on a luxury watch for yourself, Mr. Caleb? Protect her by booking a Caribbean cruise for $20,000 while she ate canned soup and crackers 3 times a day?" Caleb stood up abruptly. "This is a misunderstanding. My mother-in-law gave us permission to use that money. She wanted us to enjoy ourselves. It is all documented." "Oh yes, it is documented." The judge smiled without humor. "It is documented in the audio recordings that Mrs. Eleanor Vance made during the last 6 months, where you two are clearly heard discussing how to speed up the process to commit her to a state-run nursing home and sell her house before she could do anything about it." Harper's face completely crumbled. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. But they were not tears of regret. They were tears of someone who had just realized she had lost everything. But this hadn't started today. It all started 2 years ago, when my world collapsed and I still believed my daughter loved me. When my husband died, something in me died too. We had been together 43 years. Every morning I woke up expecting to see him next to me, and every morning reality hit me again. He was no longer there. The days became gray, endless, empty. Harper arrived one November afternoon with Caleb. They brought fresh flowers and a homemade lasagna that smelled like the ones I used to make when she was a child. They sat with me in the living room, on that sofa where her father used to read the newspaper every Sunday. "Mom," Harper said, taking my hand, her voice soft and worried, "you can't go on like this. Dad wouldn't have wanted to see you destroyed this way. Caleb and I have been talking a lot about this. We want you to come live with us. We have that big guest room on the 2nd floor that we never use. That way, you won't be alone." I didn't want to leave. This house was my entire life. Every corner held a memory. The coffee stain on the kitchen rug that I could never completely remove. The door frame in the dining room where we marked Harper's height every year. The garden my husband tended every weekend. But Harper insisted with arguments that sounded logical, sensible, full of genuine concern. "This house is too big for you alone, Mom. The property taxes are sky high. The maintenance is costing you a fortune, and the neighborhood isn't safe like before. Last week 3 houses were broken into 2 blocks from here. What would happen if someone tried to break in and you were alone?" Caleb added with that deep voice he used when he wanted to sound protective and trustworthy. "Mrs. Vance, it would be an honor for us to take care of you. You are family. My mother always says that elders are the wisdom of the house. We don't want you to be alone in such a difficult time." I accepted. My God, how I would regret that decision. The first 3 months were tolerable. Harper prepared breakfast for me some mornings. Caleb asked me how I had slept. We ate dinner together on Sundays. I felt part of something again, even if it was different, even if my husband's absence hurt every second. But then the subtle changes began. First, it was my credit card. One February morning, I tried to use it at the pharmacy to buy my medication, and it was declined. I called the bank from the pharmacy phone, confused and embarrassed while the line behind me grew. "Mrs. Vance, your account was closed 3 weeks ago by request of the account holder," the bank employee informed me with a professional and distant tone. "But I am the account holder," I replied, feeling panic start to climb up my throat. "According to our records, Mrs. Harper Vance Miller is the primary holder. You are listed as a secondary beneficiary." I arrived home, trembling. Harper was in the kitchen making coffee. I told her what had happened, hoping it was a bank error, some administrative confusion we could solve together. She didn't even look up from her mug. "Oh, yeah. Caleb and I decided it was better to consolidate the finances. Mom, you don't have a head for these things. You've always been a disaster with money. Remember when Dad had to check all your expenses because you went over budget? That wasn't true. My husband and I always managed our finances together, as a team." But before I could defend my memory, Harper continued. "Besides, at your age, it is easy to get scammed. There are many criminals taking advantage of seniors. We are protecting you. Don't worry, all your money is safe. We will take care of paying for everything you need." "But I need my medication," I said, my voice sounding smaller than I would have liked. "I know, Mom. That is why I went and paid for it for you this morning. It is already sorted." Harper finally looked at me, with that patient smile you would use with a toddler. "Trust us. We are your family." The following week, Caleb sat me down in the living room. He brought a folder full of papers. "Mrs. Vance, we need to talk about the house," he began, his tone serious but kind. "The taxes are overdue. Maintenance needs to be paid. The truth is that property is becoming a very heavy financial burden." "But that is my house," I said, feeling something in my chest tighten. "I understand. It is full of memories. But you have to be practical, Eleanor. What sense does it make to keep an empty house that is consuming your savings? If we sell it now, we can invest that money. Make it work for you. Secure your future." "I don't want to sell it," Caleb sighed, as if he were dealing with someone impossibly stubborn. "Look, we aren't saying make the decision right now. Just think about it. But in the meantime, we need you to sign some papers. Just legal formalities. Authorization so I can handle the tax payments and utilities from my account. That way they don't get behind and we avoid fines. Sign here." God, how I hated myself later for having signed. By March, my life had changed completely. I no longer had access to my money. "Caleb gave me $50 every week for your personal expenses, as if I were a teenager receiving an allowance. When I asked for more, because I needed to buy new shoes, he looked at me as if I had asked for the moon. $50 a week is more than enough, Mrs. Vance. What are you spending so much on? Here you don't pay rent, you don't pay for food, you don't pay utilities. That money is just for your little treats." My little treats. As if my entire life could be reduced to $50 a week. The rules began to appear too. I couldn't use the living room after 9 at night because Caleb needed silence to work. I couldn't invite my friends to the house without giving 2 days' notice. I couldn't use the phone for long-distance calls. I couldn't turn the television up too loud. I couldn't cook with certain ingredients because Harper was on a diet. "It is our house, Mom," Harper reminded me every time I questioned something. "We have our routines. You can't just do whatever you want without considering others. That is selfish." One April night I heard voices in the study. The door was ajar and Caleb's voice traveled clearly to the hallway where I had gone for a glass of water. "We can't go on like this, Harper. Your mother is spending more than she contributes. The medications are expensive. She eats like a family of 3. And that pension of hers barely covers half her expenses." "I know," Harper replied with a sigh. "But what do you want me to do? I can't kick her out on the street." "I'm not saying that. I'm just saying we need to speed up the process with the house. If we sell it soon, we can use that money to cover her future expenses. And if necessary, later on, we can look for a place where she is well cared for. A residence where she has people her age, activities, professional attention. A nursing home." Harper's voice sounded doubtful. "Assisted living," Caleb corrected. "It is different. And there are very good options that aren't that expensive. With what we would get from the sale of her house, we could pay for several years in advance and still have a good chunk of capital left to invest." I stood frozen in the hallway, the glass of water trembling in my hand. I heard Harper sigh again. "You're right. But let's give her a little more time. I don't want her to think we only brought her here to take everything from her." "Of course, babe. We will do it carefully, calmly. But we have to start laying the groundwork." I went back to my room without making a sound. That night I couldn't sleep. Caleb's words echoed in my head over and over again. Speed up the process. Assisted living. Laying the groundwork. May arrived, and with it, more restrictions. Caleb's parents, Richard and Barbara, began visiting us every weekend. And with their arrival, my position in that house became even clearer. I wasn't family. I was a burden. "Eleanor, could you bring us more coffee?" Barbara would ask from the living room sofa, the same sofa where I used to sit and watch my shows. "Eleanor, this food is very salty. Can't you cook something simpler?" Richard would comment, pushing his plate away with disgust. Harper never defended me. Caleb didn't either. They simply looked at me expecting me to comply with the requests, as if I were the help. One afternoon, while I was washing the dishes after one of those family meals, I heard Barbara talking to Harper in a low voice in the dining room. "Honey, you have to be firmer with her. Older people need structure. If you let her do whatever she wants, she is going to take advantage. Believe me, I worked for 20 years in a geriatric center. I know how they are. It's just that she is my mother, Barbara. I can't treat her like—" Harper left the sentence unfinished. "Like what she is," Barbara completed without mercy. "An old woman who depends completely on you. The sooner she accepts it, the better for everyone. And the sooner you accept it, the easier it will be to take the necessary decisions." I turned off the faucet. My hands were red from the hot water and soap. I looked at my reflection in the blurry glass of the window above the sink. Who was that woman? Where had Eleanor Vance gone? The one who had raised a daughter alone for 5 years while her husband worked in another state. The one who had started a small baking business that sustained her family during the recession? The one who had cared for her husband during his final illness without letting him see a single tear of hers? When had I turned into this shadow that asked for permission to use the phone in her own house? June brought a new humiliation. Harper entered my room one morning without knocking. She held a cardboard box in her hands and an expression that tried to be casual but failed to hide something darker underneath. "Mom, I need you to give me the keys to your house," she said, leaving the box on my bed. "What do you need them for?" "Caleb has to go check on some things. There are reports that there were break-ins on that street again. We want to make sure everything is okay. Besides, we have to pick up some important documents you left there." I gave her the keys. What choice did I have? But something in my stomach twisted with a terrible feeling. 3 days later, Caleb returned with several boxes. He took them directly up to the attic, without telling me what they contained. When I asked Harper what they had brought from my house, she replied with irritation. "Just old stuff that was gathering dust. Mom, old bills, unimportant papers. We stored them in the attic, just in case you need them someday." But honestly, it was pure junk. That night I waited for everyone to sleep. I went up to the attic with a flashlight. My heart was beating so fast I feared someone would hear it. I opened the boxes with trembling hands. It wasn't junk. They were my photo albums, my course diplomas, the letters my husband had written me when we were young, Harper's baptism keepsakes, my jewelry box with the pieces I had inherited from my grandmother. The property deeds to my house, bank documents, everything that proved who I was, everything that connected my present with my past, had been extracted from my house and hidden here as if it were evidence of a crime. I took the bank documents and the property deeds. I hid them at the bottom of my closet, under the old sheets that no one checked. My instinct was screaming at me that something terrible was about to happen. July was the month when everything spiraled. One afternoon of suffocating heat, Caleb called me to the living room. Harper was sitting next to him, eyes red as if she had been crying. Richard and Barbara were there too, their faces composed in expressions of concern that didn't reach their eyes. "Mrs. Vance, we have to talk about something very serious," Caleb began. On the coffee table, there were more papers. There were always papers. "We have received very worrying news from the bank." "What news?" "Your house is in foreclosure process. Apparently, there is a tax debt of 3 years that was never paid. We are talking about $45,000, including fines and interest." I felt as if I had been punched in the stomach. "That is impossible. My husband always paid the taxes on time, and after his death, I continued doing it." "Well, clearly something went wrong," Harper intervened, wiping her eyes with a tissue. "Maybe Dad forgot some payments when he was sick. Or maybe you forgot to make them afterwards. We aren't blaming you, Mom. We know you have been confused." "I haven't been confused," I said, but my voice sounded weak even to my own ears. Barbara leaned forward with that expression of fake compassion she had perfected. "Eleanor, dear, this is very common in people of your age. Memory fails. Things get forgotten. It is not your fault, but now we have to deal with the consequences. The only way to save the house," Caleb continued, "is to sell it quickly before the foreclosure is completed. I have an interested buyer who is willing to pay a fair price. It isn't the total market value, of course, because he has to assume the risk of the debt. But at least you would recover something." "How much?" $120,000. I stared at him, unable to believe what I was hearing. That house was worth at least $350,000. My husband and I had bought it for $80,000 30 years ago, and the neighborhood had appreciated enormously. "That is a fraction of what it is worth," I managed to say. "It is the only thing we can get, given the situation," Caleb replied firmly. "And believe me, it is better than losing it all in the foreclosure. At least this way you will have some money for your future expenses. I need time to think." "There is no time, Mom." Harper's voice sounded almost desperate. "The bank gave us 10 days to resolve this, or they proceed with the foreclosure. If that happens, you lose everything, and you also end up with a mark on your credit history. You won't even be able to rent an apartment on your own." Richard cleared his throat. "Eleanor, I know this is difficult, but you have to think about your future. What will you do when you can no longer live here with Harper and Caleb? They have their own lives, their own plans. That money from the sale could secure you a dignified place to spend your final years, my final years. As if I were already dead. As if the only thing left for me was to wait for the end in some place where they could forget about me. "I am going to talk to the bank directly," I said, standing up. "You can't," Caleb replied too quickly. "You no longer have legal authorization over that account. Remember, you transferred everything to Harper's name to protect your assets. Only she can negotiate with the bank now." I stood in the middle of that living room, surrounded by people who supposedly loved me, and I understood with absolute clarity that I was trapped. I had signed papers without reading them completely. I had trusted. I had believed that my own daughter would never hurt me. How stupid I had been. "I need air," I murmured and went out to the small backyard. I sat on the iron bench next to the rose bushes. The July sun was relentless. I closed my eyes, and for the first time in months, I let the tears fall freely. I wept for my husband. I wept for the woman I had been. I wept for the daughter I thought I had, and for the cruel stranger she had become. But then, a voice pulled me out of my spiral of despair. "Mrs. Vance, are you okay?" I opened my eyes. On the other side of the fence, my neighbor Arthur was watching me with genuine worry. Arthur was 72 years old, a widower like me, and had been friends with my husband for decades. I hadn't seen him in months because Harper always found excuses not to let me go out alone. "Arthur," I said, wiping my tears quickly. "What a surprise! I haven't seen you in a long time." I have asked for you several times, but your daughter tells me you are resting or not feeling well." He paused. "Mrs. Vance, forgive me for being direct, but are you okay? Are they treating you well here?" Something in the way he asked, something in the real concern in his eyes, broke the last barrier, maintaining my silence. "No," I whispered. "I'm not okay, Arthur, and I don't know what to do." He looked toward the house to make sure no one was watching us. "Listen, I have a friend who is a lawyer. She specializes in cases for seniors. I have seen situations like this before. Eleanor, what your family is doing has a name, and there are ways to defend yourself. I don't have money for a lawyer. She does free initial consultations, and if there is a real case, she can work on a contingency fee basis. At least talk to her, please. You can't go on like this." He handed me a piece of paper with a phone number. I put it in my skirt pocket just as I heard the back door open. Harper walked out with a suspicious expression. "Mom? Who are you talking to?" "With Mr. Arthur. He was just saying hello." Harper walked up to the fence with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Hi, Arthur. How kind of you to worry about my mother, but she needs to rest now. You know how she is at her age. She gets tired easily." Arthur nodded slowly, but his eyes gave me a clear message. "Call that number." Then he said goodbye and left. Harper grabbed my arm with more force than necessary. "Let's go inside, Mom. The sun is very strong and I don't want you to get dehydrated." That night, I waited until 2 in the morning. The house was in absolute silence. I went down the stairs barefoot. Every creak of the wood sounded like a gunshot in the stillness. I reached the kitchen and dialed the number Arthur had given me from the landline, keeping the volume at the minimum. A woman's voice answered on the third ring. "Kate Sterling. How can I help you?" "My name is Eleanor Vance," I whispered. "A friend gave me your number. I need help." For the next 20 minutes, I told her everything. The documents I had signed without fully understanding. The money disappearing. The conversations I had heard about selling me my own house and putting me in a nursing home. My voice trembled as I spoke, but Kate listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a brief silence before she spoke. Her voice was firm but kind. "Mrs. Vance, what you are describing to me is financial and emotional abuse of an elder, possibly also fraud if they forged documents or pressured you to sign things you didn't comprehend. But I need to see physical proof. Do you have access to any of those papers you signed? Bank statements? House documents? I have some hidden in my room. I took them from the attic." "Good. That is very good. Now listen carefully because this is crucial. I need you to act as if nothing has changed. Do not confront your daughter or son-in-law. Do not tell them you spoke with me. The longer they believe they have total control, the more evidence we can gather. But they are going to sell my house in 10 days. That is a pressure tactic. Most likely that tax debt doesn't even exist, or if it does, it was generated by them. Tomorrow, I am going to start investigating the public records of your property. I also need you to try to document everything you can. Conversations, movements, anything that proves what they are doing. How? They check my things. They control everything I do." "Your cell phone? Do you still have it?" "Yes, but Harper installed some kind of parental control. I can't download apps or access certain functions." Kate let out a sound of frustration. "Of course she did. All right. We are going to work with what we have. Can you leave the house without raising suspicion? Sometimes they let me go to church on Sundays. Caleb drops me off and picks me up 2 hours later." "Perfect. This Sunday, instead of going to church, come to my office. It is 3 blocks from Street Anthony's Church, 13th Street and Bolivar Avenue, Miraflores Building, 3rd floor. Bring all the documents you can. We will review everything and create a strategy." I hung up the phone with shaking hands. I went up the stairs trying not to make noise, but when I reached the hallway, a light turned on. Caleb was standing in front of his bedroom door in pajamas, looking at me with an undecipherable expression. "Mrs. Vance, what are you doing awake at this hour?" My mind raced looking for an excuse. I couldn't sleep. I went down for a glass of warm milk. The doctor recommended it for insomnia. He observed me for a moment that seemed eternal. "You have to be careful. At your age, falling on the stairs at night could be fatal. Next time call me. I will bring you whatever you need." "Thank you, Caleb. I'll keep it in mind." He waited until I entered my room. I heard his footsteps walking away only after I closed the door. I sat on the bed with my heart racing. Had he heard my conversation? Had he seen that I was using the phone? Sunday arrived after 4 days that felt like 4 years. In the morning, I announced that I would go to Mass. Harper looked at me with surprise. "You haven't gone to church in months, Mom." "I know, but I have been thinking a lot lately. I need spiritual peace. I need to pray." Caleb offered to take me. During the whole trip, I watched his profile while he drove. This man, who had entered my life with flowers and smiles, who called my daughter Babe with such sweetness, how could he be the same one planning to rob me of everything and lock me away in a nursing home? "I pick you up in 2 hours," he said, when we stopped in front of the church. "Don't go anywhere, is that clear? If you need anything, call me at this number." He showed me his cell phone. "I have it on speed dial on your phone." I entered the church as if I were going to stay, but as soon as his car disappeared around the corner, I left through the side door. I walked the 3 blocks to the Miraflores building with shaking legs and my purse clutched against my chest. Inside, I carried all the documents I had been able to gather. Kate's office was on the 3rd floor, just as she had said. It was small but tidy, with shelves full of law books and a dark wood desk. Kate was a woman of about 50, hair pulled back in a professional bun, intelligent eyes behind rectangular glasses. "Mrs. Vance." She received me with a firm handshake. "Sit down, please. We have a lot to review and little time." I spread all the documents on her desk. Kate examined them one by one, taking notes on a pad, her frown deepening with every page she read. "This is worse than I thought," she said finally. "This power of attorney you signed here basically gives your daughter total control over all your finances and legal decisions. And look at the date. February, just 2 months after your husband's death, when you were at your most vulnerable. Caleb told me it was just to facilitate the tax payment. That is a lie. This gives much broader powers. And here," she pointed to another document, "this transfer of your bank account to a joint name with your daughter. Do you remember signing this?" I shook my head. I signed so many papers in those days. Caleb always put them in front of me and told me where to sign. I trusted. They were my family. Kate took a deep breath. "Mrs. Vance, I investigated your property records as I promised. The alleged tax debt does not exist. Your taxes are completely up to date. Someone is deliberately lying to pressure you to sell." I felt as if a weight were lifted off me and another much heavier one placed on me at the same time. There was no debt. But that meant my own daughter had lied directly to my face to steal my house. "There is more," Kate continued. "I reviewed the movements of your bank account before they closed it. In the last 6 months before the transfer, there were significant withdrawals. $5,000 here, $8,000 there, $10,000 here. All made with your card, but on dates and locations where, according to what you told me, you were already living with your daughter. I didn't make those withdrawals. I know, but someone with access to your card did. And after the transfer, the movements are even more revealing." She turned her laptop to show me. "Look at these charges. A cruise for $18,000, purchases at luxury stores, jewelry, expensive restaurants. Meanwhile, according to what you told me, they gave you $50 weekly for your expenses." The figures danced before my eyes. Thousands and thousands of dollars. My money. The money my husband and I had saved during 40 years of hard work, disappearing in luxuries for my daughter and her husband while they made me feel guilty for asking for money for new shoes. "How much have they spent in total?" I asked with a voice barely audible. Kate checked her notes. "In the last 18 months, approximately $83,000 from your personal accounts. And that is just what I can track. If there are other accounts or transactions that don't appear on these statements, the figure could be higher. $83,000. I felt the room spinning around me. "Mrs. Vance, I need you to listen to me very carefully," Kate said, leaning forward. "What your family is doing is a felony. Financial abuse, elder exploitation, possibly document fraud. But to be able to act legally, we need stronger evidence. Recorded statements, additional documents, witnesses. How am I going to get that? They control every move I make. That is why we need to be very strategic. First, I am going to prepare a request to the court to freeze all your accounts and properties until this is investigated. That will prevent them from selling your house or continuing to spend your money. But I need your formal authorization. She handed me some papers. This time I read them completely before signing. They were legal documents naming her as my legal representative and authorizing her to act on my behalf to protect my assets. Second, she continued, I need you, when you return to that house, to act like the vulnerable and confused person they believe you are. Let them talk. If you can, record the conversations. Your phone has a voice recorder, right? I think so. She taught me how to activate it without being noticed, using a side button sequence that didn't require unlocking the screen. Practice this. When they are discussing their plans, when they talk about the sale of the house, when they say anything incriminating, record it. You don't need video, just audio. And if they discover me, it is a risk. But, Mrs. Vance, without direct evidence, this becomes your word against theirs. And, unfortunately, they have already built a narrative where you are a confused old woman who doesn't understand things. We need their own words to destroy that narrative. I looked at my watch. An hour and a quarter had passed. Caleb would come soon. There is something else I need to tell you, said Kate, her expression becoming even more serious. I did a little digging on your son-in-law, Caleb Miller. He has a record. 7 years ago, he was sued by an ex-partner for financial abuse. The case was closed because she dropped the charges, but the pattern is identical. Gain trust, take control of finances, isolate the victim. I felt nauseous. Does my daughter know this? I don't know. But if she doesn't know, she should. And if she knows and is still participating in this, then both are equally guilty. Kate walked me to the door. One last thing. At some point, they are going to realize something changed. When the bank informs them they can't proceed with the sale of the house, when they discover there are court orders blocking the accounts, there will be a confrontation. That moment will be dangerous. Dangerous how? People who feel cornered do desperate things. If at any moment you feel you are in physical danger, call 911. Do not hesitate. Your safety is more important than any evidence. I returned to the church just as Caleb arrived. During the whole way home, he asked me seemingly casual questions about the Mass, the sermon, who I had spoken with. I answered with generalities, praying internally that he wouldn't notice how fast my heart was beating. That night, during dinner, Caleb announced there was good news. The buyer of the house is ready to close the deal this week. We just need you to sign the final papers. Mrs. Vance. We will do it on Wednesday at the title company. Harper took my hand across the table. I know it is hard, Mom. But think about the positive. You will have secure money. You won't have to worry about taxes or maintenance ever again. I nodded weakly. Okay. Whatever you say. Caleb smiled, satisfied. Barbara, who was having dinner with us that night, also smiled. See, Harper, I told you your mother would finally understand what is best for her. That night, when everyone was asleep, I took out my phone. With fingers clumsy from nerves, I activated the recorder as Kate had taught me. I left it recording under my pillow. Nothing happened that night, but I was ready for when it would. Monday morning, I heard angry voices coming from the study. I grabbed my phone, activated the recorder discreetly, and approached the closed door. That is impossible. It was Caleb's voice, louder than I had ever heard it. I called the bank 10 minutes ago. They say there is a court order freezing all accounts associated with Eleanor Vance. Who the hell would request that? It has to be a bank error, Harper replied, but her voice sounded scared. Mom doesn't have the mental capacity to request something like that. She can't even operate her own phone. Someone did it for her. Someone who knows too much. There was a heavy silence. That damn neighbor. Arthur. That old busybody. I saw them talking in the yard. I bet he connected her with some lawyer, one of those who take advantage of confused old people. What are we going to do? We had everything planned. The closing on the house was in 4 days. I already spent $15,000 on the down payment for the new condo we were going to buy. Damn it. Caleb, I told you not to spend anything until we had the money from the house in our hands. You told me it was a sure thing. You said your friend at the title company could speed everything up without problems, and it would have been if your mother hadn't gone looking for legal help. Caleb hit something. Probably the desk. We need to act fast. If there is an investigation, They are going to discover everything. The withdrawals, the expenses, the transfers, everything. How bad is this? Very bad. Harper, we are talking about criminal charges, fraud, elder abuse. We could go to prison, years in prison. The silence that followed was thick with panic. Finally, Harper's voice, lower but clear. Then we have to make sure Mom can't testify. If we declare her incompetent, her testimony won't count. Your mother worked in the geriatric center. She knows psychiatrists who could diagnose her with dementia or something. It is too late for that now. There is already a lawyer involved. There are already court orders. Then what do you suggest? There was a long pause. We have to make her drop everything. The lawsuit, the orders, everything. Convince her she is making a mistake, that she is being manipulated. If she voluntarily withdraws everything, we can continue as if nothing happened. And how do we convince her of that? Pressure. We make her see that if this continues, she will lose her only family, that she will be left completely alone, that no judge will believe her over us. We are young, educated, respectable. She is a 68-year-old widow with memory problems. Who are they going to believe? My hand was shaking so much I almost dropped the phone, but I held it steady, recording every poisonous word. And if that doesn't work, Caleb's voice turned darker. There is always Plan B. We commit her for her own good. An emergency psychiatric evaluation. 48 hours of observation minimum. By the time she gets out, if she gets out, we will have already moved what we need to move. Caleb, that is. Is what? Too far? Harper, wake up. Either we act now or we lose everything, and not just your mother's money. Our reputation, our freedom, everything. Is that what you want? I didn't hear Harper's answer because, at that moment, my phone vibrated with an incoming call. I silenced it immediately, but it was too late. The conversation inside the study stopped abruptly. Did you hear that? Asked Caleb. I ran toward the kitchen as fast as my legs allowed me, trying to look busy when the study door flew open. Caleb came out first, his eyes scanning the hallway, the living room, until he found me by the sink. Mrs. Vance, how long have you been there? I just came down, I said with the shakiest voice I could produce. I was going to make myself some tea. He approached slowly, studying my face. Your phone, let me see it. My heart stopped beating for a second. My phone? What do you need it for? Just give it to me, Mrs. Vance. I'm not going to repeat myself. With trembling hands, I took the phone out of my pocket. I had stopped the recording just before running to the kitchen. Caleb took it and started checking it. Opening apps, checking call history, messages. I could barely breathe. Harper appeared behind him, her eyes also full of suspicion. Did you call someone this morning, Mom? No. I was looking at old photos. It makes me sad, but it also comforts me. Caleb returned the phone to me after what seemed like an eternity. All right, but remember, if you need to make a call, you must make it from the house phone. Your cell data plan is expired, and we don't want you spending money unnecessarily. That was a lie. I paid for my own phone plan long before moving in with them. But I nodded submissively. For the next 2 days, the tension in the house was palpable. Caleb and Harper whispered constantly. Richard and Barbara arrived on Tuesday night, and the four locked themselves in the study for hours. I remained in my room, pretending to read, but actually reviewing over and over the recording I had made. It was there. Every incriminating word, perfectly clear. Wednesday morning, Caleb entered my room without knocking. Get dressed. Mrs. Vance. We are going to the title company in an hour. It is time to sign the house papers. I'm not going to sign anything, I said, and my own voice surprised me by how firm it sounded. Caleb stood motionless in the doorway. Excuse me? I said I am not going to sign. I am not going to sell my house, and I know there is no tax debt. I know you lied to me. His expression went from surprise to fury in a second. Harper, come here, he yelled toward the hallway. My daughter appeared moments later. When she saw Caleb's expression, her face paled. What is wrong? Your mother says she is not going to sign. She says she knows we lied to her about the taxes. Harper looked at me with a mixture of rage and something that could have been fear. Mom, what nonsense are you saying? Of course there is a debt. We showed you the papers from the bank. Fake papers. Kate verified it. My taxes are up to date. They always have been. The silence that followed was like an explosion. Caleb closed my bedroom door with a slam that made the walls shake. Kate? Who the hell is Kate? His voice was dangerously low. My lawyer. And she knows everything. The $83,000 you stole, the trips, the jewelry, the restaurants, everything paid with my money while you made me believe I was a burden to you. Harper dropped onto the edge of my bed, her face completely white. Caleb, she knows. My God, she knows everything. Shut up, Harper. Caleb approached me, his presence intimidating. Listen well, you meddling old woman. I don't know what that cheap lawyer you hired told you, but you are making a grave mistake. We are your family. The only thing you have in this world. If you accuse us of anything, you will be left completely alone. Is that what you want? To die alone in some place with no one to visit you? I prefer to die alone than to live robbed. His hand raised as if he were going to hit me, but Harper screamed, Caleb, no. That will only make things worse. He lowered his hand slowly, but his eyes were full of pure hate. All right. Let's play this game your way. But I warn you something, Mrs. Vance. You are going to regret this. You are going to beg us to forgive you before this is over. They left my room, slamming the door. I heard their raised voices in the hallway, then the sound of more doors closing. I stayed sitting on my bed, shaking but also feeling something I hadn't felt in months. Power. An hour later, I heard the doorbell. Unknown voices in the living room. I peeked carefully from the second floor and saw 2 police officers talking to Caleb and Harper. One of them held several documents. Mr. Miller, Mrs. Vance Miller, we have a court order requiring the production of all financial statements and documents related to the accounts and properties of Mrs. Eleanor Vance. You are also summoned to appear before family court next Monday at 9 in the morning. Caleb took the papers with trembling hands. This is ridiculous. We are family. We have been taking care of her. She is confused. She has memory problems. She doesn't know what she is saying. That will be determined by the judge, sir. For now, you are legally obligated not to perform any additional transaction related to Mrs. Vance's accounts and to appear on the indicated date. Understood. After the officers left, the house exploded. Barbara and Richard arrived minutes after receiving a frantic call from Caleb. The 4 were in the living room when I came down the stairs. There she is, said Barbara when she saw me, her voice dripping poison. The ungrateful one. After everything we did for you, everything you did. The words left my mouth before I could stop them. Do you refer to stealing $83,000 from my accounts? To trying to steal my house? To treating me like a servant in what was supposed to be my home? Richard got up from his chair, pointing at me with an accusing finger. You are lucky we put up with you for all this time. You are a bitter old woman who ruined your daughter's life. She could have been someone if she hadn't had to take care of you. I didn't need to be taken care of. I needed to be respected. Respect, Barbara scoffed. You know what we are going to give you? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. When this is over, and believe me, it will end badly for you, you are going to end up in a state facility eating mush and dying alone, because no one is going to want anything to do with the crazy old woman who reported her own family. Harper finally spoke, her voice broken. Mom, we can still fix this. Drop the lawsuit. Drop everything. We can forget this happened. We can start over. Start over. I looked her straight in the eyes. Start over letting you rob me? Start over pretending I didn't hear your plans to commit me? Start over being the stupid old woman who signs whatever you put in front of her? You are my mother, screamed Harper with tears rolling down her cheeks. You are supposed to trust me. And you were supposed to love me. But love isn't measured in how much you can steal from someone, Harper. Your father would be devastated if he knew what you became. It was as if I had hit her. Her face completely crumbled, and she ran toward the stairs, sobbing. Caleb looked at me with absolute hate. I hope it is worth it, he said with a cold voice. I hope those lawyers and that money give you the warmth your family gave you, because now you have nothing else but that. That night I packed a small suitcase. I called Kate from the kitchen phone at 3 in the morning. I need to leave this house, now. Are you in immediate danger? I don't know, but after today, I don't feel safe here. All right, I have contacts at a temporary shelter for seniors in abuse situations. I can make arrangements for early tomorrow. But, Mrs. Vance, once you take this step, there is no turning back. The final confrontation in court will be inevitable. I know, and I am ready. At 6 in the morning, before anyone woke up, I went down the stairs with my suitcase. Arthur was waiting for me outside in his car, just as Kate had coordinated. I didn't look back when the door closed behind me. I couldn't afford to hesitate now. The shelter was a discreet building downtown, run by a non-profit organization that helped older adults in abuse situations. The director, a woman named Emanuela, welcomed me with genuine warmth. Mrs. Vance, here you are safe. No one can enter without authorization. We have security cameras, staff 24 hours a day, and we work directly with the authorities. Your family cannot reach you here. They assigned me a small but clean room. It had a bed, a closet, a chair by the window. It was simple, austere even, but it was mine. For the first time in 2 years, I closed a door and knew no one would enter without my permission. Kate arrived that same afternoon with more documents to review. She had obtained complete bank records, transaction histories, copies of all the powers of attorney and transfers I had signed. The case is solid, she said, spreading the papers on the small table in my room. We have documentary evidence of fraud. We have the audio recordings where they admit their plans. We have witnesses who can testify about their behavior. But I need to prepare you for what is coming. Mrs. Vance, this will not be easy. How difficult. Your daughter and son-in-law are going to hire lawyers. Good lawyers, probably. They are going to try to discredit you. They are going to argue that you are not in full mental faculties, that you are being manipulated by me or by others. They are going to bring experts who will testify about your alleged mental confusion. It is going to be brutal. And we are going to win. Kate looked me directly in the eyes. Yes, we are going to win. Because the evidence is irrefutable. But the process will be painful. You will have to sit in a courtroom and listen to your own daughter say terrible things about you. You will have to maintain composure while they try to destroy your credibility. Are you prepared for that? I thought about my husband, about the 43 years we spent building a life together, about the sacrifice he made working away from home so we could buy that house, about the nights spent sick at the end, holding on to my hand, making me promise I would take care of myself. I am prepared, I said. The following days were a whirlwind of legal preparation. Kate brought a forensic psychologist who evaluated me exhaustively, testing my memory, my reasoning ability, my understanding of past and present events. I spent 3 hours answering questions, solving puzzles, remembering dates and details. Mrs. Vance, said the doctor at the end with a smile, your mind is perfectly clear. In fact, your memory and cognitive ability are above average for your age. Any argument of mental incompetence will be easy to refute with my evaluation. We also had to prepare my testimony. Kate made me go over every detail again and again. When the control began, what documents I signed, what conversations I heard, how I felt every day living in that house. When you are on the stand, she instructed me, do not let yourself be provoked. They are going to try to make you angry, make you cry, make you seem unstable. Answer only what they ask you. Be clear, direct, honest. Your truth is your best weapon. On Friday, I received a call. It was Harper. I don't know how she got the shelter's number, but her voice sounded desperate on the other end of the line. Mom, please, we need to talk. This all got out of control. I never wanted to hurt you. Caleb and I were just trying to help and things got complicated, but we can fix it. Please, don't go to court on Monday. Drop everything, and we can resolve it as a family. We are no longer family, Harper, I said with a calm voice. We stopped being family when you decided my money was more valuable than my dignity. You are my mother. You can't do this to me. Do you know what will happen if we lose this case? You know the consequences. Yes, I know exactly the consequences. They are the consequences of your own actions. You will regret it. Her voice changed, becoming harder. When you are alone, when no one wants to know about you, when you realize you destroyed your only family for money, you are going to regret it. The money never mattered to me, Harper. What mattered to me was you. But the daughter I raised died at some point and I didn't realize it. The woman you are now is a stranger to me." I hung up before she could respond. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was rage mixed with a sadness so deep it hurt physically. On Sunday, Kate arrived with news. "Your daughter's lawyers filed an emergency motion arguing that you are being held against your will in the shelter and that you need to be psychiatrically evaluated." The judge rejected it after reviewing Dr. Martinez's evaluation. "They also tried to access your accounts, arguing there were urgent medical expenses to pay. That was also rejected. They are desperate, extremely, and that makes them dangerous in the legal sense. They are going to throw all the garbage they can in court. I have information that they hired a very aggressive lawyer, known for his intimidation tactics, Marcus Thorne. He is good at what he does, which is basically destroying the credibility of witnesses. How does he do it? He takes small inconsistencies in testimonies and magnifies them. He finds minor errors in dates or details and presents them as if they were deliberate lies. He asks questions designed to confuse or make people contradict themselves. He is an expert at making honest people look like liars. And how do we stop him? By being absolutely precise. Saying, 'I don't recall,' when we don't recall something instead of guessing. Not letting ourselves be pressured to give answers we aren't sure of. And, above all, maintaining calm, no matter how aggressive he gets. We spent all Sunday practicing. Kate asked me tricky questions, interrupted me, raised her voice, tried to confuse me with dates and details. Over and over until my answers became automatic, calm, precise. Monday dawned gray and cold. I dressed in a simple suit Kate had bought for me, gray slacks, white blouse, a wool sweater, nothing flashy, nothing that drew attention. I wanted to look like what I was, an older, dignified, sincere woman. Arthur insisted on accompanying us to court. Her husband was my friend. I promised him if she ever needed help, I would be there. Today she needs help. We arrived at the courthouse at 8:30. The hallways were full of lawyers with briefcases, families waiting for their cases, the constant hum of legal conversations. Kate guided me to a private waiting room. "Your case is the 3rd of the morning. We will probably start around 10. How do you feel?" "Scared, but ready." At 9:50, they called us. We walked down the hallway toward the courtroom. The dark wood doors opened, and everything became real in a way it hadn't been until that moment. Harper was sitting on the left side of the room with Caleb, Richard, and Barbara. The 4 looked at me when I entered. Harper's expression was a mixture of pain and rage. Caleb simply observed me with cold eyes. Richard and Barbara looked at me as if I were trash. Next to them was their lawyer, Marcus Thorne. He was a man of about 50, expensive suit, hair perfectly combed, the kind of person who knew exactly how much power he had and enjoyed using it. We sat on the right side. Kate opened her briefcase and began to organize documents. Arthur sat in the row behind us, his presence silent but comforting. "Everything is going to be fine," whispered Kate. "Remember what we practiced." The judge entered and we all stood up. She was a woman of about 55, serious expression, intelligent eyes that seemed not to miss any detail. She took her seat behind the high bench and reviewed the documents in front of her. "Case number 23,412, announced the court clerk. Eleanor Vance versus Harper Vance Miller and Caleb Miller. Lawsuit for financial abuse, fraud, and elder exploitation." The judge looked up. "Good morning, everyone. This is a particularly delicate case involving family relationships and serious allegations. We will proceed with respect, but also with the rigor the law requires. Are both sides ready to present their opening arguments?" Kate stood up. "Ready, Your Honor." Marcus Thorne also rose, his smile confident. "Completely ready, Your Honor." "Proceed, Miss Sterling," indicated the judge. Kate approached the podium with sure steps. "Your Honor, this case represents one of the clearest and most painful examples of systematic abuse toward an older person I have seen in my 20 years of practice. Mrs. Eleanor Vance, a 68-year-old widow, in full use of her mental faculties, was systematically stripped of her autonomy, her dignity, and approximately $83,000 of her savings by her own daughter and her daughter's husband." Marcus stood up immediately. "Objection, Your Honor, counsel is presenting conclusions as facts. There is no evidence that. Overruled, interrupted the judge. These are opening statements, Mr. Thorne. You will have your chance to refute them. Continue, Miss Sterling. Kate nodded. The facts we will present today will show a deliberate pattern of manipulation that began just 2 months after Mrs. Vance's husband's death, when she was at her most vulnerable. We will show how the defendants gradually took total control of her finances through powers of attorney obtained under false pretenses. We will show bank records documenting extravagant expenses paid with my client's money while she was given $50 a week for her basic needs. And, most importantly, we will present audio recordings where the defendants explicitly discuss their plans to sell her house without her true consent and commit her to an institution to assume total control of her assets. A murmur ran through the room. The judge banged her gavel once. Order! Kate returned to her seat. Marcus Thorne stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. His smile was calculated, designed to project absolute confidence. Your Honor, what we heard from Miss Sterling sounds terrible, almost cinematic in its drama. And that is precisely the intention. To create a narrative of villains and victims that appeals to emotions but ignores the real facts. The truth is much simpler and much less sinister. My client, Harper Vance Miller, is a loving daughter who, together with her husband, took in her mother after her father's death. Mrs. Vance was depressed, confused, incapable of handling her own affairs. They assumed the tremendous responsibility of caring for her, not out of legal obligation, but out of family love. I looked at Harper while her lawyer spoke. She kept her eyes down, her hands clasped tightly on her lap. The documents Mrs. Vance signed, continued Marcus, were signed voluntarily, after clear explanations, with the express purpose of protecting her assets from potential scams or mistakes due to her advanced age and compromised emotional state. The expenses the opposing party qualifies as extravagant were normal expenses of a family that had increased by 1 member, in addition to the considerable medical and care costs of an older person. And as for these alleged recordings, we will see that they are conversations taken out of context, misinterpreted by an elderly woman who unfortunately is being manipulated by third parties looking to benefit from creating family discord. He sat down with a satisfied air. The judge took notes for a moment before speaking. Very well. Miss Sterling, you may call your first witness. I call Mrs. Eleanor Vance to the stand. I stood up with shaking legs. The path to the stand seemed miles long. The clerk swore me in to tell the truth. I sat in the high chair, feeling the weight of all eyes on me. Kate approached with a kind expression. Good morning, Mrs. Vance. Can you tell us when your husband passed away? December 3rd, 2 years ago. My voice sounded firmer than I expected. And how was your relationship with your daughter before that moment? Good. Not perfect, but good. We saw each other regularly. We celebrated birthdays together. Holidays. She was my daughter. I loved her. When did you begin living with her and her husband? Approximately 2 months after my husband's death. February of the following year. They convinced me it was better for me not to be alone. Did you want to move? I hesitated. No. I wanted to stay in my house. But they insisted a lot. They said they were worried about me. I was very sad. I wasn't thinking clearly, so I accepted. Kate nodded. What happened with your access to your own bank accounts after moving? They took my cards. They said it was to protect me from scams. Caleb, my son-in-law, began giving me $50 every week for my personal expenses. $50 weekly? Yes. And what was your monthly income at that moment? Between pension and savings. My pension was $2,200 monthly, and I had savings of approximately $160,000. A murmur ran through the room again. The judge took notes without looking up. Do you know what the rest of your money was spent on? Now I do. At that moment they told me it went to taxes, utilities, food, my medications. But later I discovered it was spent on travel, expensive restaurants, jewelry, designer clothes for them. Objection. Marcus stood up. The witness is speculating on the destination of funds without having direct knowledge. Sustained, said the judge. Mrs. Vance, limit your answers to what you know personally, Kate continued. Did you personally see your daughter and son-in-law purchase expensive items? Yes. Caleb bought a watch that cost $15,000. I heard him tell the salesperson the price when he bought it. Harper bought designer dresses, several that cost more than $2,000 each, and they booked a Caribbean cruise that cost $20,000 for 2 people. How do you know the specific prices? Because I heard them talk about them. And because later, when Caleb told me there was no money to buy me new shoes because we had to economize, it seemed strange to me that they were planning a $20,000 cruise. Tell me about the rules you had to follow in that house. I took a deep breath. I couldn't use the living room after 9 at night. I couldn't invite friends without giving 2 days' notice. I couldn't turn the TV up loud. I couldn't cook certain foods because Harper was on a diet. I couldn't make long-distance calls. I had to ask permission for almost everything. And how did that make you feel? As if I were a child. Or worse, as if I were an employee. I didn't feel at home. I felt tolerated, like a burden they had to endure. Mrs. Vance, did you ever hear conversations where your daughter and son-in-law discussed plans regarding your future? Yes, several times. Can you describe one of those conversations? I looked directly at Harper as I spoke. One night in April, I heard them talking in the study. Caleb said I was spending more than I contributed and that they needed to speed up the process of selling my house. They talked about looking for an assisted living facility, a nursing home. For me, they said, with the money from the sale of my house, they could pay for several years in advance and still have capital left to invest. Harper closed her eyes, tears rolling down her cheeks, but they were not tears of regret. I could see it in the tension of her jaw. How did you feel hearing that? Betrayed, terrified, as if the floor disappeared beneath my feet, because I understood it had all been a lie, that they never wanted to help me. They just wanted my money. Mrs. Vance, were you ever told your house had a tax debt of $45,000? Yes, in July. Caleb showed me papers and said, if I didn't sell quickly, I would lose the house in a foreclosure. And was it true? No. My lawyer verified with the county. My taxes were up to date. They always had been. It was a lie to pressure me to sell. Kate approached the table and took a folder. Your Honor, I request permission to play an audio recording Mrs. Vance made in the defendant's home. The judge nodded. Go ahead. The silence in the room was absolute when the recording began to play. My own voice, trembling, was barely audible. But Caleb and Harper's voices were perfectly clear. We need to act fast. If there is an investigation, they are going to discover everything. The withdrawals, the expenses, the transfers, everything. How bad is this? Very bad. Harper, we are talking about criminal charges. Fraud, elder abuse. We could go to prison. Years in prison. The recording continued, every word dropping like a bomb in the room. When it reached the part where they discussed committing me on an emergency basis to buy time, I saw Harper sink into her chair, her face completely pale. The recording ended. The silence that followed was deafening. The judge had an expression I couldn't decipher, but her eyes were fixed on Harper and Caleb. No further questions for now, Your Honor, said Kate, returning to her seat. The judge looked at Marcus. Cross-examination. Marcus rose slowly. He had lost part of his earlier confidence, but tried to hide it. He approached the stand with measured steps. Mrs. Vance, Marcus began with a soft, almost kind voice. You mentioned you were very sad after your husband's death. Would you say your judgment was affected in those months? My heart was broken, but my mind worked perfectly. Were you taking any medication for depression or anxiety? Yes. My doctor prescribed something to help me sleep, and those medications can cause confusion or affect memory. Kate stood up. Objection. Counsel is asking the witness to speculate on medical effects. I'll rephrase, said Marcus before the judge could answer. Mrs. Vance, did you experience confusion or memory problems while taking those medications? No. Are you sure? Because my client indicates there were multiple occasions where you forgot conversations, repeated questions, didn't remember recent events. My daughter is lying. A murmur ran through the room. Marcus smiled slightly, as if that answer served him. That is a strong accusation, Mrs. Vance. You are saying your own daughter, the woman you raised, would lie under oath about your mental state. I am saying my daughter is willing to say whatever is necessary to justify what she did. Yes, she would lie. She has done it before. Marcus walked to his table and picked up some papers. Mrs. Vance, do you recognize these documents? I looked at them. They were the powers of attorney and transfers I had signed. Yes, that is your signature on each one. Yes. Did someone physically force you to sign them? Not physically, but they pressured me. They told me half-truths. They didn't really explain to me what I was signing. But you signed voluntarily. No one held your hand. No one threatened to hurt you if you didn't sign. Not in that way. But answer yes or no, please. Did you sign these documents by your own hand? Yes. Thank you. Marcus returned to the center of the room. Now, about this recording, did you inform my client you were recording her? No. Did she know her private conversation with her husband was being recorded? No. So you recorded your daughter without her consent, listening behind closed doors in what she believed was a private conversation in her own home. Kate stood up. Your Honor, the law permits one-party recordings when there is reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. And that suspicion will be evaluated, replied the judge. Continue, Mr. Thorne. But get to the point. Mrs. Vance, isn't it possible you misinterpreted that conversation? That when your son-in-law spoke of assisted living, he referred to future options, not immediate plans? That when they discussed finances, they did so because they were genuinely worried about managing your resources appropriately? No, that is not what they were doing. But you admit your judgment was affected by grief, that you took medications, that you signed documents without reading them completely. Isn't it possible your perception of events is distorted by your emotional state? My perception is based on facts. $83,000 missing, lies about non-existent debts, conversations where they plan to get rid of me. Those are facts, not perceptions. Marcus changed tactics. How much is Miss Sterling charging you to represent you? She works on a contingency fee. If we win, she receives a percentage. Ah. So she has a significant financial interest in winning this case. Isn't it convenient that suddenly all this evidence appeared? These recordings? Isn't it possible someone is manipulating you to create a case that doesn't really exist? I leaned forward, looking directly at him. Mr. Thorne, I have lived 68 years. I raised a daughter practically alone for 5 years. I had my own business. I cared for my husband during his terminal illness. I am not a confused old woman who can be easily manipulated. I know exactly what my daughter and her husband did to me, and no amount of trick questions is going to change those facts. The room went silent. Marcus looked at me for a long moment, then looked at the judge. No further questions. I returned to my seat. Kate squeezed my hand briefly. You did perfect, she whispered. The next 2 witnesses were Dr. Martinez, who presented my psychological evaluation demonstrating full mental competence, and a forensic accountant who detailed every suspicious transaction, the massive withdrawals, the luxury expenses, the discrepancies between reported income and actual expenses. When Marcus called Harper to the stand, the room was tense with anticipation. My daughter walked forward with slow steps, as if each one cost her tremendous effort. She swore to tell the truth and sat down. Harper, began Marcus with a soft voice. Do you love your mother? Yes. Her voice was barely a whisper. I love her. Why did you invite her to live with you? She had just lost my father. She was destroyed. She didn't eat well, didn't sleep, didn't leave the house. I was afraid she would let herself die of sadness. I wanted to take care of her, protect her. And the documents she signed, the powers of attorney, the transfers? For what purpose did you ask for them? To protect her. Mom was always a little careless with money. Dad was the one who handled everything. Without him, I was afraid she would make mistakes, that someone would take advantage. I just wanted to keep her finances organized and safe. Did you steal your mother's money? No. Every dollar I spent was to maintain the household where she lived, pay for her needs, ensure her well-being. Kate rose for cross-examination. Her expression was steel. Mrs. Vance Miller, you said every dollar was for your mother's well-being. Was the $20,000 cruise for your mother's well-being? Harper hesitated. We needed a break. Caring for someone is exhausting. Did your mother go on that cruise? No, but. Answer yes or no. Was your husband's $15,000 watch for your mother's well-being? That was. It was an anniversary gift. Paid with your mother's money while giving her $50 a week. Were the designer dresses at $2,000 each for your mother's well-being? I needed appropriate clothes for. Yes or no, Mrs. Vance Miller? Were those dresses for your mother's well-being? No. Tears were beginning to fall down Harper's face. Mrs. Vance Miller, in the recording we heard, you and your husband discuss criminal charges about going to prison. Why would you have that conversation if you were only caring appropriately for your mother? We were scared. Mom's lawyer was twisting everything, making innocent actions look criminal. Is lying about a $45,000 tax debt an innocent action? Harper didn't answer. Is planning to commit your mother to a nursing home without her consent an innocent action? I never. Your own words are on that recording. Mrs. Vance Miller. Do you deny them? It was taken out of context. We were considering future options. No. Your mother is 68 years old. She is in perfect mental and physical health. Why would she need to be in a nursing home? I thought. I believed it would be better for her. Or would it be better for you to have her out of the way while you liquidated her assets? Objection, yelled Marcus. Argumentative. Sustained, said the judge. Miss Sterling, rephrase. Kate stepped closer to the stand. Mrs. Vance Miller, one last question. If you truly loved your mother and only wanted to care for her, why did you strip her of her autonomy, her money, her dignity, and plan to take her home? Harper sobbed openly now. I don't know. Everything got out of control. At first we just wanted to help, but then the money was there and we had debts, and Caleb said she would never notice. She stopped abruptly, realizing what she had just admitted. Marcus closed his eyes with an expression of defeat. No further questions, said Kate. The judge called a 30-minute recess. When she returned, her expression was severe. I have reviewed all the evidence presented, the documents, the recordings, the testimonies, and I have reached several conclusions. First, Mrs. Eleanor Vance is in full use of her mental faculties. Second, there was a clear and documented pattern of financial and emotional abuse. Third, the defendant's actions constitute fraud, misappropriation, and elder exploitation. Harper was sobbing in her chair. Caleb had his eyes fixed on the table. Therefore, I order the following. All legal powers granted to Harper Vance Miller over the finances and properties of Eleanor Vance are immediately revoked. Full restitution of the $83,000 spent is ordered, plus interest calculated at the legal rate. Defendants are prohibited from any contact with Mrs. Vance without her express consent. I am referring this case to the District Attorney's Office for investigation of possible criminal charges. And, finally, I order the defendants to pay the full legal costs of this process, including Miss Sterling's fees. The judge banged her gavel. Case closed. Kate hugged me. Arthur was crying tears of joy behind us. I looked across the room. Harper was looking at me with an expression I will never forget. Absolute loss, mixed with something that might have been late regret. Caleb took her by the arm and pulled her out of the room quickly. Richard and Barbara followed him without looking back. 3 months later, I moved into a small but cozy apartment downtown. It had 2 bedrooms, a kitchen with a window facing the park, and most importantly, it was completely mine. Every decision, from the color of the curtains to what time I ate dinner, was mine. I recovered almost all my money. The district attorney filed charges against Caleb and Harper. He accepted a plea deal and received 2 years of probation plus restitution. Harper received 1 year of probation. Both were left with criminal records that would follow them the rest of their lives. I haven't spoken to my daughter again. Sometimes I think of her, of the girl she was, of the good times we had. But that person no longer exists. The woman she became is a stranger to me. Arthur became my best friend. We have dinner together twice a week. We go to the movies on Sundays. He introduced me to his group of friends from the community center. And now I have more social life than I had in years. Kate and I also became friends. She invited me to give talks to senior groups on how to recognize and prevent financial abuse. My story helps others. It gives purpose to everything I suffered. 2 weeks ago, I received a letter from Harper. I didn't open it. I held it in my hands for an hour, looking at my name written in her familiar handwriting. But finally, I put it in a drawer, unread. I'm not ready. Maybe I never will be. And that's okay. Because I learned something in these years of nightmare and rebirth. Forgiveness is optional. Healing is not. And I chose to heal. Every morning I wake up in my bed, in my apartment, with my money safe in my bank account that only I control. I make my coffee how I like it. I read the newspaper at my own pace. I decide what to do with my day without asking anyone for permission. It is a simple, quiet, dignified life. It is my life, finally, completely mine. And that, after everything I went through, is the sweetest victory I could have asked for.